The news reached Earth 3 days after the massacre. Admiral Sarah Chen was having coffee in her office when the emergency alert came through. She set down her cup and watched the recordings from Harvest Moon in complete silence. 2.5 million people. Gone. Families, children, scientists, farmers, all dead because the Kethvar decided humans didn't deserve to live. Admiral Chen had gray hair and calm eyes, but those who knew her understood she was the most dangerous person in human space. For 30 years she had been preparing for this exact moment, the moment when humanity would need to fight for its very survival. "Get me the president," she said to her assistant, "and activate Protocol Omega." Protocol Omega. 3 words that would change the galaxy forever. Within hours, the Galactic Council responded to the Harvest Moon massacre. Their message was predictable. Ambassador Zethkol of the ancient Mordai species spoke for all the civilized races. "The Galactic Council expresses deep concern over recent events in human space," he said, reading from a prepared statement. "We encourage all parties to pursue diplomatic solutions. Violence serves no one. Deep concern. Diplomatic solutions." Pretty words that meant nothing. The truth was simpler. The older alien races were scared of the Kethvar Empire. They had been scared for thousands of years. So they did what they always did when the Kethvar killed someone. They looked the other way and pretended it wasn't their problem. "What about sanctions?" asked President Martinez during the emergency session. Maya's father had become president 2 years ago, partly because people trusted someone who had lost family to alien aggression. "Sanctions are not appropriate at this time," Ambassador Zethkol replied smoothly. "The Kethvar maintained that humans violated territorial boundaries. These matters are complex." President Martinez's face went cold. "Complex? They murdered children. How is that complex? The Kethvar have certain historical claims to that region of space. These legal questions must be resolved through proper channels." Translation: the Kethvar were too powerful to challenge, so the Galactic Council would let them do whatever they wanted. That was their first mistake, Admiral. Chen activated Protocol Omega from her secure bunker beneath the Swiss Alps. She placed her hand on the scanner and spoke the words she had hoped never to say. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen. Authorization Omega 77 Alpha. Humanity is under threat of extinction. All hidden assets are now active. All classified protocols are now in effect. God help us all." Across human space, things that had been sleeping for decades suddenly woke up. On the mining station at Kepler 442, the mining equipment shed its disguise. What looked like excavation machinery revealed itself to be automated shipyards. Machines that had been pretending to dig asteroids began building warships instead. At the research station orbiting Wolf 3M59, the scientists stopped pretending to study cosmic radiation. They were engineers. Military engineers, and they had been building the most advanced weapons in the galaxy. Hidden bases throughout human space came online, facilities that existed in no official records, installations that the Galactic Council had never heard of, places where humanity had been preparing for war for 50 years, because Admiral Chen had learned something important during her career. She had studied every species in the galaxy, every empire, every war, and she had noticed a pattern. The strong survived. The weak died. And everyone else pretended that was just the natural order of things. Humanity had been weak once. When they first reached the stars, they had tried diplomacy. They had tried friendship. They had tried to find their place in the galactic community. But the galaxy didn't want humans. Most aliens saw them as aggressive upstarts who bred too fast and spread too far. The older races barely tolerated human existence. The younger ones competed with humans for territory and resources. And the Kethvar saw humans as vermin to be exterminated. So Admiral Chen had made a decision. If the galaxy wouldn't accept humans as equals, then humanity would make itself too strong to destroy. For 50 years, humanity had been building the largest military force in galactic history. They had done it in secret, disguising their true purpose, spreading their assets across hundreds of star systems. The Galactic Council thought humans had maybe 10,000 ships, mostly cargo vessels and civilian craft, a few destroyers and cruisers for system defense. They were wrong. In a warehouse on Titan, maintenance robots began assembling the first Nemesis-class battleship. Each one was larger than a Kethvar dreadnought. and carried enough firepower to level a city. Humanity had built 5,000 of them. At the automated factory on Proxima Centauri b, production lines that had been making industrial equipment switched to their real purpose. They began churning out Reaper-class destroyers. Fast, deadly, and nearly invisible to enemy sensors, 10,000 of them waited in hidden docks. On Europa, the ice mining facility revealed its true nature. Under the frozen surface, humanity had built the largest shipyard in their history. It had been working non-stop for 30 years, building carrier ships that could launch thousands of fighters each. But Admiral Chen's greatest secret wasn't the ships themselves. It was how they worked together. Every human vessel was connected through quantum-entangled communication arrays. They could coordinate instantly across vast distances, share targeting data, adapt tactics in real time, move as one massive organism instead of individual ships. No other species had this technology. The Galactic Council didn't even know it was possible. Maya Martinez, now 23 years old, stood in the command center watching the fleet activation with quiet satisfaction. She had spent 15 years preparing for this moment, studying alien psychology, learning their weaknesses, planning their destruction. The Kethvar made one critical error, she told Admiral Chen. They think like predators. They assume their prey will run or submit when threatened. And humans don't run, Admiral Chen replied. No, humans hunt back. Maya had become humanity's leading expert on alien warfare, not because she loved violence, but because she understood something the galaxy had forgotten. Humans were not prey animals. They were pack hunters who had evolved to work together against threats much larger than themselves. The Kethvar were about to remember why humans had climbed to the top of Earth's food chain. Fleet status report, Admiral Chen ordered. The holographic display showed the true scope of humanity's hidden armada. 500,000 warships spread across human space, more firepower than most species possessed in their entire history, all of it built in secret over 5 decades. All ships report ready for operations, came the response. Crews are boarding now. The crews were another surprise. Humanity had been training soldiers in secret too. Millions of them. Men and women who had spent their entire adult lives preparing for this war. They knew alien tactics better than the aliens themselves. What about the Galactic Council? Asked President Martinez over the secure channel. They'll try to stop us. Maya laughed, but there was no humor in it. Let them try. The Mordai have 50,000 ships. The Veltar have 30,000. The Krex Confederation has maybe 20,000 combat vessels. She paused, looking at the display showing humanity's forces. We have 500,000 warships, and every single one is more advanced than anything they've ever seen. If they want to protect the Kethvar, they're welcome to try. Admiral Chen opened a channel to every ship in the human fleet. 500,000 captains waited for her words. Men and women who had trained their entire lives for this moment. This is Admiral Chen, she began. 15 years ago, the Kethvar murdered 2.5 million innocent people on Harvest Moon. They did it to teach us our place in their galaxy. Her voice grew harder. Today, we teach them theirs. We will show the galaxy what happens when you threaten human children. We will show them what humanity does to those who mistake our kindness for weakness. She paused, looking out at the stars where her enemies waited. The Kethvar wanted to hunt us like animals, but they forgot something important. On Earth, when the prey fights back, it's not prey anymore. Across human space, 500,000 warships began to move. The largest fleet in galactic history was going to war, and at the center of it all, a little girl who had watched her world burn 15 years ago smiled coldly. Maya Martinez had kept her promise to her mother. She had survived. Now it was time for the Kethvar to learn what that survival had cost them. Captain Marcus Webb stood on the bridge of the UHS Retribution, watching his crew prepare for war. The Nemesis-class battleship was 2 kilometers long and packed with weapons that could crack a moon in half. But more importantly, it was crewed by humans who had spent 15 years learning how to kill Kethvar. Captain, all systems are green, reported his tactical officer, Lieutenant Sarah Park. Quantum cannon charged. Shield generators online. Fighter bays loaded with Reaper drones. Marcus nodded. Around him, similar scenes played out on 500,000 other ships. Humanity's secret fleet was finally revealed. And it was magnificent. But the Kethvar still didn't understand what they faced. On the bridge of his flagship, Kethvar Fleet Commander Vasktar reviewed the intelligence reports with growing annoyance. The humans were mobilizing some kind of response to the Harvest Moon lesson. Pathetic. How many ships do they have? He asked his intelligence officer. Perhaps 10,000, Commander. Mostly converted civilian vessels. Nothing that poses a real threat. Vaskatar clicked his mandibles in amusement. 10,000 ships against his battle fleet of 100,000 vessels. The humans would be crushed within hours. They learned nothing from Harvest Moon, he said. Very well. We will teach them again, more harshly this time. He was looking at reports that were 15 years old. The Galactic Council had been feeding the Kethvar outdated information about human military capabilities. They thought they were preventing a war by making humans seem weak. Instead, they had made the coming slaughter inevitable. On Earth, Admiral Chen coordinated the largest military operation in human history. Her command center deep underground buzzed with activity, as thousands of officers managed the deployment of 500,000 warships. Admiral, the Fifth Fleet reports ready for operations, called out Commander Rodriguez. All stealth ships are in position around Kethvar space. Excellent. What about the Galactic Council? Ambassador Zethkol is demanding an immediate meeting. He says he wants to prevent unnecessary bloodshed. Admiral Chen almost smiled. Tell the ambassador that humanity appreciates his concern, but we no longer require his permission to exist. The truth was, Admiral Chen had been studying the Galactic Council for decades. She knew exactly how they would react. First, they would try to stop the humans through diplomacy. Then they would threaten sanctions. Finally, they would watch from a safe distance while the Kethvar and humans destroyed each other. They thought they were being clever, playing the two sides against each other while keeping their own hands clean. They had no idea what was coming. Maya Martinez walked through the intelligence center, reviewing the final preparations. At 23, she was the youngest senior advisor in human history, but she was also the foremost expert on Kethvar, psychology in the galaxy. The Kethvar have divided their forces into 3 main battle groups, she explained to Admiral Chen. 100,000 ships total. They're confident because they think we only have 10,000 vessels. And when they discover the truth, Maya's smile was cold as winter. They'll panic. Kethvar psychology is based on dominance hierarchies. When they realize they're outgunned 50-1, their command structure will collapse. She brought up a holographic display showing Kethvar territory. But we can't just defeat them. We need to make sure the entire galaxy understands what happened here, why it happened, and what will happen to anyone else who tries to genocide humans. Admiral Chen studied the tactical display. You want to make an example of them? No, Maya replied quietly. I want to make sure what happened to my mother never happens to another human child. The fleet began moving in coordinated waves. First came the stealth ships, Wraith-class frigates that could slip past enemy sensors like ghosts. They carried quantum bombs capable of destroying entire space stations with a single hit. Behind them came the main battle fleet, Nemesis-class battleships with armor thicker than most space stations and weapons that fired concentrated antimatter, Atlas-class carriers that could launch thousands of fighters in minutes, Titan-class dreadnoughts that were essentially flying fortresses. But the most impressive thing wasn't the individual ships. It was how they worked together. Every vessel was connected through quantum communication arrays that allowed instant coordination across vast distances. The fleet moved like a single organism, sharing sensor data, coordinating targeting, adapting tactics in real time. No other species had ever seen anything like it. Engineer Rosa Volkov monitored the fleet from her station aboard the command ship. She had designed many of the systems that made humanity's advantage possible. Self-repairing armor that could fix battle damage in minutes.
AI-assisted targeting systems that never missed.
Weapons that could adapt to enemy defenses automatically. Admiral, all ships report ready for quantum jump, she announced. We can reach Kethvar space in 6 hours. Admiral Chen opened a channel to the entire fleet. 500,000 crews waited for her orders. This is Admiral Chen to all vessels. In approximately 6 hours, we will arrive at the edge of Kethvar space. There we will begin Operation Harvest Moon. She paused, letting the significance of the name sink in. Our mission is simple. The Kethvar Empire will cease to exist. Their military will be destroyed. Their leadership will face trial for war crimes. Their people will learn what it means to live under the protection of those they tried to exterminate. Throughout the fleet, human crews prepared for battle. Many of them had family on Harvest Moon. All of them understood what this war meant for humanity's future. The galaxy has ignored us, dismissed us, allowed our people to be slaughtered while they spoke of diplomacy and understanding. Admiral Chen continued. Today that ends. Today we show them what humans do when pushed too far. The quantum drives activated simultaneously across 500,000 ships. Space itself seemed to bend as the largest armada in galactic history prepared to jump to their target. On the bridge of the Retribution, Captain Webb looked at his crew one final time before battle. They were young, most of them, born after Harvest Moon, raised on stories of human children dying while aliens looked away. "Any last words before we jump?" he asked. Lieutenant Park spoke for all of them. "For Harvest Moon, sir." "For Harvest Moon," the crew replied in unison. Across human space, similar scenes played out. Crews saying goodbye to families they might never see again, captains checking their weapons one final time, engineers making sure every system was perfect. But on one ship, the mood was different. Maya Martinez stood alone in her quarters, holding a small photograph. It showed her as a child with her parents on Harvest Moon, back when the world was green and beautiful. "I kept my promise, Mama," she whispered to the image. "I survived. I learned. And now I'm going to make sure no other little girl has to watch her world die." She put the photograph away and walked to the bridge. It was time to keep another promise, the one she had made to herself 15 years ago, sitting in an escape pod while her world burned. The Kethvar would pay for every human life they had taken, and the galaxy would watch. Admiral Chen gave the final order. "All ships execute quantum jump. Destination, Kethvar space." 500,000 warships vanished from human space in flashes of twisted light. When they reappeared 6 hours later at the edge of Kethvar territory, they would bring with them the fury of an entire species. The Kethvar had wanted to teach humanity its place in the galaxy. They were about to learn that humanity's place was at the top. The quantum jump ended, and space around the Kethvar border fortress of Galmeth suddenly filled with 500,000 human warships. The ancient fortress had guarded the edge of Kethvar space for 3,000 years. Its massive weapons could destroy entire fleets. Its shields had never been broken. Today it would fall in 6 hours. Commander Zach Thule stared at his sensors in disbelief. The readings made no sense. According to his instruments, there were more human ships than stars in the local system. That was impossible. Humans were weak, primitive. They barely had 10,000 vessels in their entire fleet. "Sensor malfunction," he declared. "Run full diagnostics." But his sensor officer, Sub-Commander Nelvar, was already checking the readings 3 times. "Sir, sensors are functioning normally. I count 500,000 human vessels." "Repeat, 500,000. The bridge fell silent. That many ships shouldn't exist. No species in galactic history had ever built such a massive fleet. Even the Kethvar Empire at its peak only had 200,000 warships. "Impossible," Commander Zachthul whispered. On the bridge of the UHS Retribution, Captain Webb watched the enemy fortress with calm satisfaction. The Kethvar were about to learn their first lesson about humanity. Numbers mattered, but technology mattered more. "Lieutenant Park, begin the demonstration," he ordered. "Yes, sir. Wraith Squadron, you are cleared to engage." 12 stealth frigates moved toward the fortress like shadows made real. They were invisible to Kethvar sensors, using technology based on quantum field manipulation. The aliens couldn't detect them until it was far too late. Commander Zachthul watched his fortress shields flicker and fail as explosions erupted throughout the station, but there were no enemy ships anywhere near them. "How were the humans attacking?" "Sir, we're detecting quantum bombs materializing inside our shield perimeter," reported Nelvar, his voice high with panic.
They're phasing through our defenses somehow.
"That's impossible. Nothing can phase through our shields." But as he spoke, another wave of explosions rocked the fortress. Human weapons were appearing inside their defensive barriers, bypassing every protection the Kethvar had built. The quantum bombs were just the beginning. As Galmeth's shields collapsed, the real attack began. Captain Webb opened fire with every weapon on his ship. Quantum cannons that fired concentrated antimatter, plasma beams that could cut through any armor, missile swarms guided by AI systems that predicted enemy movements. Around him, 400,000 other human warships did the same. The ancient fortress of Galmeth, unconquered for 3 millennia, died in a storm of light and fire. Its massive structure broke apart under the concentrated firepower of humanity's fleet. Debris scattered across space like the remains of a shattered dream. Commander Zach Thul's last transmission was simple. Alert High Command. The humans? The humans are not what we thought. Then his ship exploded and the first Kethvar stronghold fell to human forces. Across Kethvar space, similar attacks began simultaneously. Human fleets struck 17 different targets at once, coordinated through quantum communication arrays that allowed instant coordination across vast distances. Fleet Admiral Chen watched the battle reports flow in from her command ship. Every attack was proceeding exactly as planned. The Kethvar were completely unprepared for humanity's true military capabilities. "Ma'am, we're receiving communications from Kethvar High Command," reported her communications officer. "They're demanding to know our intentions." Chen smiled coldly. "Put them through." The holographic display showed High Commander Vextal, supreme leader of the Kethvar military. He was trying to project strength, but Chen could see the fear in his red eyes. "Human Admiral," he began, his voice carefully controlled. "Your attack on our border installations is an act of war. We demand you withdraw immediately or face the consequences." "High Commander," Chen replied calmly, "we are already at war. You declared it when you murdered 2.5 million civilians on Harvest Moon. Those were not civilians. They were colonists illegally occupying our territory." Chen's expression didn't change. "They were children, old man. Farmers, scientists, people whose only crime was existing in a galaxy that didn't want them." She leaned forward, her voice growing harder. "You wanted to teach us our place. Consider this your first lesson in return." Behind her, the tactical display showed human forces systematically destroying every Kethvar military installation within 100 light-years. The aliens' vaunted battle fleets were being torn apart by weapons they couldn't understand, tactics they'd never seen, and coordination they couldn't match. "You have 50,000 ships?" Vextal protested. "We have 100,000. You cannot win this war." Chen almost laughed. The Kethvar still didn't understand what they faced. "We have 500,000 ships, High Commander. Every one of them more advanced than your best dreadnought. Your intelligence was 15 years out of date." The alien's face went pale. "Impossible. No species has ever built such a fleet. No species has ever needed to," Maya Martinez said, stepping into view beside Admiral Chen. "No species has ever been threatened with total extinction by genocidal aliens who mistake mercy for weakness." Vextal recognized her immediately. Maya's face had been broadcast across Kethvar space as one of the few Harvest Moon survivors. Seeing her now, alive and commanding human forces, struck him like a physical blow. "You were supposed to be dead," he whispered. "I was 8 years old when your people murdered my mother," Maya replied, her voice quiet but filled with deadly certainty. "I've spent 15 years studying your weaknesses, learning your psychology, planning your destruction." She smiled, and it was the most terrifying expression Vextal had ever seen. "Did you really think we would just forget? Did you think we would forgive? Humans don't work that way, old man. When you hurt us, we hurt you back. When you threaten our children, we eliminate you." The communication ended, leaving Vextal staring at a blank screen. Around him, his command staff waited for orders that would never come. How do you fight an enemy with 5 times your numbers and technology you can't comprehend? On the human side, the war was proceeding exactly as planned. Captain Webb's retribution had moved on to the next target, a Kethvar shipyard that produced their heavy cruisers. It was defended by a fleet of 30,000 ships. It fell in 2 hours. The pattern repeated across Kethvar space. Human forces struck fast and hard, using overwhelming firepower and superior technology to crush any resistance. But they weren't just destroying things randomly. Every target had been carefully chosen. Maya Martinez had spent years studying Kethvar psychology. She knew exactly how to break their empire's will to fight. "Target their command centers first," she had told Admiral Chen during the planning phase. "Kethvar society is based on strict hierarchies. Disrupt their command structure and they'll panic. Then hit their production facilities. Show them they can't replace what we destroy. Finally, isolate their home systems. Let them watch us systematically dismantle their empire while they huddle in fear." It was working perfectly. Across Kethvar space, military commanders tried to coordinate responses to human attacks, only to find their communication networks jammed by human electronic warfare systems. Production facilities that had built warships for 1,000 years exploded under human bombardment. Supply lines that had fed the HFY war machine for centuries were cut by human raiders. But the most devastating weapon was psychological. For the first time in their history, the HFY were facing an enemy that was genuinely superior to them. An enemy that had been secretly preparing for war while pretending to be weak. On the bridge of his flagship, High Commander Vextal watched his empire crumble. Reports flooded in from every sector. Human fleets were everywhere, striking targets the HFY didn't even know were vulnerable. "Sir," his intelligence officer reported, "we've lost contact with the Thekmor system and the Velnash shipyards, and the communication relay at Zorteth." Vextal closed his eyes. 3 major systems, gone in one day. What about our main battle fleet? Admiral Korthal is attempting to engage human forces at the Pexvar system. He has 70,000 ships. The report came back 6 hours later. Admiral Korthal's fleet had been completely destroyed. The humans had suffered minimal casualties, 70,000 HFY warships, annihilated by an enemy that barely took damage in return. For the first time in 3,000 years, the HFY Empire was losing a war. And they were losing it badly. High Commander Vexitel opened a channel to HFY Prime, the Empire's capital world. "My Emperor," he said to the ancient ruler who had led their species for 500 years, "we have gravely underestimated the humans. They possess military capabilities far beyond anything in our intelligence reports." Emperor Thekvar's voice was cold with fury. "How many ships do they actually have?" 500,000 confirmed, my Emperor. "Possibly more. And their technology..." Vextal paused, struggling to find the words. "It's centuries ahead of ours." The silence stretched for long moments. Then the Emperor spoke, his voice quiet but filled with an emotion the HFY rarely experienced. "Fear. Then we are doomed." Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the final approach to HFY Prime. The enemy capital world hung before them like a jewel of black and red, protected by the most powerful defensive network in galactic history. Or so the HFY thought. Around the planet, massive orbital stations bristled with weapons. Energy shields that could stop entire fleets covered the world's surface. 100,000 of their best warships waited in defensive formations. It looked impressive. But Maya Martinez had studied HFY defensive doctrine for 15 years. She knew exactly how to break it. "The stations are linked through a central command network," she explained to Admiral Chen as they prepared for the final assault. "Destroy the command ship and the entire defense grid will lose coordination." "And the fleet?" Maya smiled grimly. "HFY commanders are trained to follow strict battle plans. They don't adapt well when things go wrong. We hit them fast and hard, disrupt their formations, and they'll panic." It had taken humanity 6 months to fight their way to HFY Prime. 6 months of crushing every enemy fleet, destroying every military installation, systematically dismantling an empire that had ruled for 10,000 years. The HFY had tried everything. Desperate counterattacks that accomplished nothing. Attempts to negotiate that were ignored. Pleas to the Galactic Council for intervention that fell on deaf ears. The other alien species watched from a safe distance as humanity tore apart one of the most powerful empires in galactic history. They were too shocked to interfere, even if they wanted to. "Admiral," reported Captain Webb from the Retribution, "all fleets are in position. We're ready to begin the final assault." Chen opened a channel to every ship in the human armada. 500,000 vessels waited for her words. "This is Admiral Chen to all forces. Today we complete what the HFY started 15 years ago on Harvest Moon. Today we show the galaxy that human lives matter, that human children matter, that genocide has consequences." She paused, looking at the world where billions of HFY civilians waited in terror. "Our enemy believes strength comes from cruelty. That power comes from murder. Today we prove them wrong. Strength comes from protecting the innocent. Power comes from justice." The attack began with humanity's stealth frigates phasing through the enemy's shields, just as they had at every other battle. Quantum bombs materialized inside the HFY defense stations, crippling their weapons before the battle even started. But this time was different. This time Admiral Chen had ordered the bombs to target only military systems. Life support, civilian areas, evacuation systems, all were left untouched. High Commander Vextal watched from his command ship as the orbital defenses flickered and died. But instead of the total destruction he expected, the human weapons had been surgically precise. The stations were disabled, not destroyed. Their crews were alive. They could have killed everyone, he whispered in amazement. Why didn't they? He was about to learn something important about human psychology. Something the Kethvar had never understood. Humans didn't kill for pleasure. They killed when they had to, when they were threatened, when their children were in danger. But when the threat was removed, when victory was certain, humans chose mercy. The orbital battle lasted 4 hours. Human forces overwhelmed the Kethvar fleet through superior numbers, better technology, and tactical coordination the aliens couldn't match. By the end, 90,000 Kethvar warships were disabled or destroyed. The human fleet had lost 3 ships. Captain Webb brought the Retribution into orbit around Kethvar Prime. Its massive weapons trained on the planet's surface. Around him, hundreds of thousands of other human ships did the same. One word from Admiral Chen, and the Kethvar homeworld would burn just like Harvest Moon had burned 15 years ago. But the word didn't come. Instead, Maya Martinez stepped onto the bridge of the command ship, carrying a small device in her hands. It was a quantum communicator, designed to broadcast to every screen and speaker on the planet below. For 15 years, she had dreamed of this moment, the chance to face the species that murdered her mother, the opportunity to make them pay for what they had done. But now, looking down at a world full of terrified civilians, she remembered her mother's words. All creatures deserve kindness, even the Kethvar. Maya activated the communicator. Her image appeared on every screen across Kethvar Prime, in every bunker where millions of aliens huddled in fear. My name is Maya Martinez, she began, her voice calm and clear. 15 years ago, I was 8 years old. I lived on a human colony called Harvest Moon, with my parents and 2.5 million other people. On the planet below, Kethvar civilians listened in stunned silence. They recognized her face from the old propaganda broadcasts. The human survivor. The one who got away. Your military came to our world without warning, without demands. They murdered everyone they could find. Men, women, children, babies, all of us. My mother died protecting me so I could escape. Her voice grew harder. Your leaders called us vermin. Insects. They said we deserved to die because we existed in their galaxy. They broadcast our deaths as entertainment. Maya paused, letting the words sink in. Today we have 500,000 warships in orbit around your world. We have the power to do to you what you did to us, to turn your planet into a graveyard and call it justice. Across Kethvar Prime, billions of aliens waited for the killing to begin. They had seen what human weapons could do. They knew their orbital defenses were gone. They were helpless, but we won't, Maya continued, because we are not you. We don't murder children. We don't commit genocide for entertainment. We don't kill the innocent to make a point. The relief was visible even from orbit as an entire world exhaled at once. However, Maya's voice grew cold as winter. Your empire is finished. Your military is destroyed. Your leaders will face trial for war crimes. Your people will learn to live under the protection of those you tried to exterminate. She leaned forward, speaking directly to every Kethvar on the planet. This is what mercy looks like. Remember it, because if any of you ever threaten human children again, mercy will not be offered twice. The broadcast ended, leaving an entire world in stunned silence. On the bridge of his disabled command ship, High Commander Vextal stared at the blank screen in amazement. The humans had won, completely, utterly. They could do anything they wanted to his people, and they had chosen forgiveness, Emperor. Thekivar's personal shuttle approached the human flagship under a flag of surrender. The ancient ruler who had led the Kethvar Empire for 500 years came aboard to formally surrender to Admiral Chen. He was old, even by Kethvar standards. His once proud armor was tarnished, his red eyes dim with defeat. But he carried himself with dignity as he faced the human commander. I am Emperor Thekvar, he said simply. I come to surrender my empire and accept responsibility for the war crimes committed against your people. Admiral Chen studied him for a long moment. Do you understand what your forces did on Harvest Moon? Yes, we murdered innocents. We committed genocide against a peaceful colony. He paused, struggling with words his species rarely used. We were wrong. Maya Martinez stepped forward. The Emperor recognized her immediately and his shoulders sagged with shame. You were 8 years old, he said quietly. I remember the intelligence reports. A child who survived when everyone else died. I survived because my mother sacrificed herself to save me, Maya replied, just like millions of other parents would do for their children. Parents your soldiers murdered without a second thought. The Emperor closed his eyes. What punishment do you demand? Admiral Chen spoke for humanity. Complete disarmament of your military forces. War crimes trials for those responsible for Harvest Moon. Reparations to the families of the victims, and a guarantee that the Kethvar Empire will never again threaten human civilians. And our people? Our civilians? Will live in peace under human protection, Chen replied. Your species will be given the chance to learn from its mistakes, to become something better than what it was. Emperor Tekvar looked up in surprise. You're not going to exile us? Execute our leadership? Destroy our culture? Maya Martinez answered him. We're going to do something your species never learned how to do. We're going to show you mercy, real mercy, the kind that comes with responsibility. 3 days later, the Galactic Council held an emergency session. Representatives from every major species gathered to discuss the new reality. Humanity had just destroyed the most powerful empire in galactic history in 6 months of warfare. Ambassador Zethkol of the Mordai spoke for all of them. The humans have demonstrated military capabilities far beyond anything in our records. Their fleet numbers exceed our combined forces. What do they want? Asked the Veltar representative. Admiral Chen answered that question herself, addressing the council in person for the first time in human history. We want what we've always wanted, she said simply. The right to exist without fear. The right to raise our children in peace. The right to live as equals among the stars. And if we refuse? Asked the Krex ambassador. Chen's smile was cold as space. You've seen what happened to the Kethvar. They underestimated us. They thought we were weak because we tried diplomacy first. They thought we were harmless because we showed mercy when we could. Humanity's patience snapped. Part 1. The meeting room on the Terran Federation's main station was quiet. Too quiet. President Sarah Chen sat at the head of the long table, her hands folded as she stared at the holographic display floating above them. The numbers glowed red against the dark walls. 50,000 dead. 15,000 of them were children. Madam President, Admiral Marcus Webb said softly. His voice carried the weight of 30 years in space. The casualty reports from New Geneva are confirmed. Sarah nodded slowly. She had read the reports 3 times already. Each time the words hit harder. The Zephyrian Coalition had claimed it was an accident. They said their warships were conducting training exercises near the human colony. They said the humans looked threatening while working in their fields. An accident, she whispered, her voice cold as space itself. Around the table, the Federation Council members shifted in their seats. They had all seen the footage from New Geneva. The orbital bombardment had lasted 6 hours. 6 hours of continuous fire on farms, schools, and homes. No military targets. Just families trying to live their lives on a world they had spent 20 years building into something beautiful. General Patricia Rodriguez, head of Federation Defense, placed a datapad on the table. The Zephyrians are calling it regrettable but necessary defensive action. Their official statement says the colonists were displaying aggressive agricultural behavior. A bitter laugh escaped from Councilman James Park. Aggressive agricultural behavior. They killed children who were playing in gardens and called it self-defense. Sarah closed her eyes. For 30 years, humanity had been the galaxy's punching bag. The Zephyrian Coalition, made up of 4 alien species who thought they owned space, had been testing human patience for 3 decades. They blockaded trade routes and called it security measures. They bombed human ships and called them accidents. They insulted human diplomats and called it cultural differences. The galaxy's older civilizations watched it all happen with amusement. The Hegemony Council, controlled by ancient species like the crystal-based architects and the gas-dwelling ethereals, treated humanity like annoying children. They patted human heads and told them to be patient. They said violence never solved anything. They said diplomacy was the answer. But diplomacy had not saved the 15,000 children on New Geneva. Madam President, Admiral Webb said again. The Zephyrian Admiral Vex Cthulhu has sent a message. He says humanity should be grateful. He says they could have destroyed the entire planet. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Sarah opened her eyes, and everyone around the table felt something shift. The woman who had spent 15 years preaching patience and peaceful solutions was gone. In her place sat someone else entirely. "Admiral Webb," Sarah said, her voice carrying a tone that made veteran soldiers straighten their backs. "How long would it take to mobilize our full military capability?" Webb blinked. In 30 years of service, he had never heard those words from a Federation president. "Madam President, our full capability? We've never. That is, we have protocols in place, but how long, Admiral?" 72 hours, ma'am. Maybe less." Sarah stood up slowly. She walked to the massive viewing window that looked out into space. Hundreds of ships moved in orderly patterns around the station. Cargo vessels, diplomatic transports, research ships. The peaceful fleet of a peaceful people. But behind those civilian ships, hidden in the shadows between stars, waited something else entirely. Something the galaxy had never seen. "The Zephyrians think we are weak," Sarah said, still looking out at the stars. "The Hegemony Council thinks we are children. They have watched us absorb punishment for 30 years and decided that humans are natural victims." She turned back to face the council. Her expression was calm, but her eyes held something that made everyone in the room very uncomfortable. They are about to learn that human patience is not the same thing as human weakness. General Rodriguez leaned forward. "Madam President, what are you suggesting?" "I am suggesting that we show the galaxy what 3 centuries of human military development looks like when our children are threatened." Sarah walked back to her chair but did not sit down. "We have spent 30 years being peaceful. We have absorbed every insult, every attack, every accident because we believed in diplomacy." She placed her hands on the table and looked at each council member in turn. "They killed our children and called it defensive action. They think we will file another diplomatic protest. They think we will ask the Hegemony Council for another useless investigation. They think we will continue to be victims." The room was silent except for the soft hum of the station's life support systems. "Admiral Webb," Sarah said, "send a message to all Federation military commanders. Classified Priority Alpha. Tell them to prepare for Operation Righteous Fury." Webb's face went pale. Operation Righteous Fury was a theoretical plan that existed only in the deepest classified files of Federation military command. It was the plan for what humanity would do if their enemies ever pushed too far. "Madam President," Councilwoman Elena Vasquez said carefully, "Operation Righteous Fury calls for the use of technologies that we have kept secret for decades. If we reveal our true capabilities, then the galaxy will finally understand who they have been underestimating," Sarah finished. "Send the message, Admiral." Webb nodded and activated his communicator. Around the table, council members exchanged glances. They all knew about humanity's secret military projects. They all knew that the Federation's public military was only a small fraction of what humans could actually do in a war, but they had never imagined they would use it. "General Rodriguez," Sarah continued, "contact the Zephyrian Coalition. Tell them that the Terran Federation is withdrawing from all non-aggression pacts effective immediately." "Yes, ma'am. What else?" Sarah's smile was cold and sharp. "Tell them that they have 6 days to experience what happens when humanity's patience finally runs out." Over the next hour, messages went out across human space. Military commanders who had spent decades running training exercises suddenly found themselves preparing for real war. Research stations that had been developing theoretical weapons started moving them to active status. Ship captains who had never fired a shot in anger received orders that made their blood run cold with anticipation. The galaxy had no idea what was coming. On distant worlds, alien diplomats filed routine reports about humanity's latest diplomatic complaint. They noted that President Chen seemed unusually emotional about the New Geneva incident. They recommended standard responses about regret and misunderstandings. None of them understood that they were watching the end of an era. Sarah Chen stood alone in her office hours later, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, Zephyrian coalition forces were celebrating their successful training exercise. They were probably laughing about how the weak humans would respond with more useless words. They had 6 days to learn that humanity had spent 30 years being patient not because they were weak, but because they were kind. That kindness was about to end. In the depths of space, hidden human facilities received activation codes they had waited decades to use. Weapons that existed only in nightmares began powering up. Technologies that could reshape solar systems started their initialization sequences. The galaxy was about to discover that humanity's greatest strength had never been their diplomacy or their peaceful nature. It had been their choice not to use everything else.